Hello and welcome to this short topic video on social psychology looking at conformity. In this video we'll examine the different reasons why people conform, including informational social influence and normative social influence, as well as the types of conformity including internalisation and compliance. Firstly, let's start by examining what is meant by the term conformity. Conformity is when a person changes their behaviours, attitudes and/or values due to a real or imagined group pressure. For example, if 3 of your friends offer you a cigarette when they're all smoking, you may decide to smoke, that is change your behaviour, due to a real group pressure. According to Kelman, there are 3 levels of conformity, including compliance, identification and internalisation. Now it's useful to think of these 3 terms from the lowest or the most shallow level of conformity, which is compliance, to the deepest or most extreme level of conformity, which is internalisation. For each of these levels, you can consider 3 key questions. Firstly, is there a change in public behaviour? Secondly, is there a change in private beliefs? And thirdly, is the change short or long term? Now let's start with compliance. Here a person changes their public behaviour, but not their private beliefs, and this is very often a short-term change. In other words, a person conforms to the majority publicly, in spite of not really agreeing with them privately, and it's usually done simply to fit in. A good example here is of the ash line study. For identification, a person changes their public behaviour and their private beliefs or attitudes to identify with a particular group. This usually only takes place in the presence of the group as the individual conforms to the expectations of that role they're in. For example, during the day I take on the behaviour and beliefs of a teacher, however these beliefs and behaviours quickly change when I leave work. A good example here is the Zimbardo prison study, which demonstrates the idea of conformity to social roles. Finally, internalisation is the deepest level of conformity where the beliefs of the group become part of the individual's own belief system. For example, if I lived with a group of vegetarians and became vegetarian for the rest of my life, I will have internalised these beliefs, resulting in a long-term, semi-permanent change. In addition to the 3 types of conformity, there are also 2 reasons why people conform. According to psychologists, people conform because of normative social influence or because of informational social influence. The 2 pictures demonstrate normative and informational social influence. Normative social influence is where a person conforms to be accepted and belong to the group despite privately disagreeing. Why do they do this? Firstly, because it's rewarding, they fit in, and secondly, to avoid social punishment, being ridiculed. Informational social influence is where a person conforms to gain knowledge and/or be right. They do this to act appropriately in an ambiguous situation, and secondly to avoid standing out. Have you ever noticed how the smartest people in your class become more popular during the exams? Clearly everyone wants to sit next to them because of informational social influence. There we go, we've now examined the 3 types of conformity, that is compliance, identification and internalisation, and the 2 explanations of why people conform, normative and informational social influence. Now let's apply these ideas to an application question. Here's a potential exam style question that I've made up. Now before you begin an AO2 application question, it's important to highlight the extract as you go through it. Joseph, Jim and Graham have all started new jobs at Tutor to You and all 3 are keen to do well. Graham laughs a lot of the jokes his colleagues tell, even though they're not always funny. Joseph watches his colleagues closely to make sure that he completes the work exactly as they do to avoid making mistakes, and Jim prefers to learn by trial and error. He believes that it's only by making mistakes he'll really understand what he's doing. So there's your extract. The type of question that could go with this is which person's behaviour is influenced by normative social influence and which person's behaviour is influenced by informational social influence. Justify both your choices for 6 marks, so a big question. Now it's really clear from the extract that Jim's not actually conforming because he's not copying anyone, which leaves us with Graham and Joseph. So I would immediately highlight, preferably in different colours, the 2 people that I'm going to be using in my answer. Let's shift our question up and look how we can apply our knowledge to these answers, okay? So the question was, which person's behaviour is influenced by normative social influence? So firstly, we might just start by defining what normative social influence is. We might say it's where a person conforms to be accepted and belong to part of a group, despite privately disagreeing. Now at this stage, we've not actually applied our knowledge, so our answer isn't really worth any marks here. What we have to do is apply really clearly our answer to the extract. So you'll see here, Graham is demonstrating normative social influence as he is laughing at the jokes his colleagues tell. That's conforming to be part of the group, even though they're not funny, so he's privately disagreeing with them. I highly recommend, like I've done in the answer here, quoting from the extract directly, because then the examiner can't say that you've not applied your knowledge. Let's do the same for Joseph. So we could say that informational social influence is where a person conforms to gain knowledge and or be correct. But again, I've not applied my knowledge. Here we could say that Joseph is demonstrating informational social influence because he is watching his colleagues closely and make sure he completes the work exactly as they do to avoid making mistakes. I've quoted the extract. Therefore, he is conforming as he wants to complete the work correctly and to be correct. Those two application statements together would get us into a top mark band. So there you have it, our first revision video on social psychology conformity. Thank you.